Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the National Bleav Network, and joining me to break down the Astros 25 draft and pretty much the only healthy talent left in the organization, I guess, is host of the Astros Future podcast, now part of our Bleav Network family. It's our friend Jimmy Price. And Jimmy, kind of believe these guys can get their required Cam Smith 32 minor league games in by, say, late August. And in that case, they'll be ready for a Houston call-up by then, right?
Yeah, I mean, if they get them going right now, then yeah, I mean, at this point, you know, like you mentioned, healthy guys in the system. They got them in the system now. Everyone's ready. Everyone's available for postseason.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's insane. And we got to talk about some of that stuff as the season goes along, but let's get into this draft stuff. And right off the top, Jimmy, can you just speak in generalities? What's your first impression of this draft? Did you like it compared to recent Astros drafts?
Yeah, I do actually, and for a couple of reasons. Well, the first thing that's is unfortunate. I'll just throw this out there now, but you know, you sign Christian Walker, you lose your second round pick. You also lose a fourth round comp pick they would have got for Berkman. So that was the bad part. But everything else. This draft, to me, it was different than what we've seen from Dana Brown the last couple of years. He went with a little more high potential. You know, they drafted the high schooler in the first round, Xavier Neyens, and they haven't done that since 2015 when they took, Kyle Tucker in the first round, high school position player. So to see them go that route, but then they got another high school in the seventh round, a catcher. They drafted three high schoolers in rounds 11 to 20. One of them ended up not signing, but they ended up signing four high schoolers in this draft and then two more that were undrafted. And that's pretty unique for what we've seen the last couple of years. So it kind of felt like, you know, maybe in the years past, I don't necessarily want to say they played it safe with some of the picks. Because, I mean, like Bryce Matthews, Walker Yannick, they're not like safe picks. They're guys with potential, good, you know, high potential. But this year kind of felt like maybe we're going to rebuild the bottom of the organization. And, you know, when you draft a high schooler, you know it's going to be even the best of the best ones are going to take 3 years to get up there. But it felt like a draft where they were trying to get some talent down in that lower levels to mix with some of the international guys they signed recently, you know, Kevin Alvarez and guys like that. But that's the main difference I've seen from this year to last year. And then they also went a little more position player heavy than they have in years past. They've kind of really gone pitching heavy the last couple of years. So, which is great for me. I mean, I love getting the position players in. I love getting the high potential high school guys. But I would say that's my biggest takeaway is that they definitely went with a different philosophy. I think taking a little more high school guys and more position players.
First round pick Xavier Neyens is the first high school position player the Astros took in the first round since Kyle Tucker. What can you tell us about the shortstop?
Big time bat. You know, I think it's pretty crazy for any high schoolers to be ranked up that high, obviously, but for pretty much everyone, consensus saying he's got the best raw power in the draft, potentially even out of college players, but for sure out of the high school level is crazy. And that's coming from the left side. So big time raw power, huge arm over at short. He's already like 6'4", 210 pounds. Does he end up moving to third base eventually? Maybe, but I think he's got plenty of the arm for it. Anytime there's a guy with power, some people bring up swing and miss concerns, but you know, given his age, I think the Astros just swung real high with the bat, knowing that he has a chance to be an impact middle of the lineup kind of guy with that left-handed swing and the power he can provide. He ended up signing for a little over $4 million. So they haven't had a player, you know, this level talent, you know, low in the system, really probably since the, you know, Yordan Alvarez, I guess, if you go back and look when he was coming up after that Dodgers trade, but really good to get a guy with that level of potential, huge potential there.
He's already signed. How many guys are signed so far? We're doing this Monday night.
Yeah, so they drafted 19. There's 20 rounds, but they didn't have the second round pick. So they drafted 19. They signed 18 of them. The 19th rounder, Joey McLaughlin, ended up not signing commitment to Arkansas State. The Astros, essentially, they just ran out of money. I did the math. I think they would have been able to give him like $154,000 to sign out of high school, and I'm guessing his commitment was stronger than that. So, but signed 18 of the 19, and then I believe they signed, I think it was 8 undrafted free agents, with 2 of them being high schoolers.
Now, Neyens' quote caught everybody's attention. When he was asked about the Astros, he said, quote, "I know they whip the Mariners every year in the AL West, so that's what I know about the Astros. I've been to quite a few Mariners-Astros games. I watched a bit of it on TV, but I just know they always run the West," unquote. And Jimmy, he comped his offensive game to Bryce Harper and his defense to Corey Seager. But I'll go bigger than that, Jimmy. I'm going to just call him Xavier Ohtani because he was a high school closer with a 95-mile-an-hour fastball.
Yeah, I mean it's I mean obviously just a tremendous athlete and what he can do offensively and even on the mound like that. Obviously won't be pitching in the pros unless things take a horrible turn. But let's see, Bryce Harper and Corey Seager. You said Corey Seager, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bryce Harper and Corey Seager together. I'll gladly take that as a first round pick. So, but no, I mean, and it's funny hearing him say that coming from Washington, and he's 100% accurate. The Astros have owned the West, and they have whooped the Mariners, but the last really 9-10 years now.
Yeah, he's saying Bryce Harper, I assume, as an offensive player, he said, but not the Bryce Harper that will be cussing out Rob Manfred. Go check that out. Go check that story out if you haven't already.
I did. I read that one. Yeah.
Also worth noting, he's the third shortstop that the Astros drafted in the first round in the last 13 years. The other three, Correa, Bregman, and Bryce Matthews. Of course, Bryce was a shortstop when they drafted him, as was Bregman. The Astros' next pick was in the third round, LSU outfielder Ethan Frey. He's a huge dude, Jimmy.
Yeah, 6'6", but you can't let that take away from what he can do offensively and what he is as an athlete. He's like 6'6", but a really good runner. I think he DH'd most of the time last year because he was dealing with a torn labrum, but hit 331, 13 homers. A scout I talked to that scouted him said that he had some of the best power that he's scouted in his time as a scout from Ethan Frey. So just like they did with Neyens, getting the big power, I think they did the same thing with Ethan Frey here. We'll see where he ends up playing, probably corner outfield spot, but they drafted him for the bat. And he hit well in the SEC, hit well for LSU, and that was coming off the injury. So healthy year for him now. Really excited to get a guy like him in the system. Ended up having to go over slot for him. I think they signed him for almost $1 million, and the slot for his position was about $800,000.
Bonus factoid, Frey was the 12th ranked catcher in the nation coming out of college. I'm not going to go through every pick, but there's one more I want to hit specifically, Jimmy. I'll skip 4th round pick Nick Monastery, and let's move to the 5th round pick Nick Potter, because he's the first pitcher the Astros took in this draft. And Jimmy, I saw Potter's fastball tops out at 100 miles an hour. Are we going to call it Nick Potter and the Goblet of Fire?
Well, if that's how he's throwing, then maybe we will. Kenny and I were talking about that, and I think the Astros are going to give him every opportunity to start. He was a reliever in college and throwing that heat, but it sounds like he's got a good mix, and I think the Astros are going to give him every opportunity to start, just like they will with all the guys. I mean, we're seeing that with even Brian Abreu. He was a starter in the minors and eventually turned into a reliever. But yeah, the Astros have done well at finding guys out of nowhere. Ethan Pecco a couple years ago, Bryce Mayer from Missouri last year, and hopefully Potter will be that next guy in line with the stuff he can provide.
So what else caught Jimmy's eye? We're going to hit that in a second. I just want to remind our listeners, though, did you guys like the Astros draft? Let me know in the YouTube comments. Look for our YouTube shorts where I'm putting up shorts all the time. So if you need a quick break at work, check out the shorts. Make sure you're also subscribed on YouTube and your favorite podcast app so you can get all the updates, and drop us a quick thumbs up as well. All right, Jimmy, which guys in the middle or late rounds could be Astros sleepers in this draft?
They drafted a catcher in the 7th round, Jace Mitchell, and I had the chance to talk with him. But big time power, and really, if you kind of read his profile, it sounds kind of similar to Neyens with the left-handed bat, the big time power. Obviously, he's a catcher, Neyens infielder, but ended up signing him for, I think it was close to $800,000, which is a really good overslot signing. Had a strong commitment to University of Kentucky, SEC school, and they were able to pull him away there. So that's one I'm really intrigued to see, another high schooler. But really going down, I think the one that caught a lot of people's eyes was DJ Newman out of Bowling Green. He was announced as a two-way player. The Astros haven't messed around with the two-way player thing at all. They haven't drafted any, but this is the first one that I can recall, at least recent time, where they drafted him, announced him as a two-way player, had just some ridiculous offensive stats. I think he hit almost 400 in his college career at Bowling Green, but had some good pitching stats too. So that's one that's kind of intriguing to me. Just I'm interested to see how the Astros play him in the minor league system. Do they end up letting him do both? Do they get him into the system, get him into Florida, and find out which one they think he can do better? That's one. And if I had to throw one other out there, Kyle Walker, 8th round pick out of Arizona State. Was at Grambling before he went to Arizona State. Kind of reminds me of like a Tony Kemp kind of guy. Walks more than he strikes out. Really good speed, electric, gets dirty. He's never coming back home with a clean shirt. And I think he's going to be a real high energy guy, kind of like Tony Kemp to get in the system. So super excited to have him too.
Who are your favorite undrafted free agents that they signed?
If you take away the high schoolers, which I think are really intriguing, they're just hard to find information. Ryan Petrovich and then August Caneo, a catcher and a right-handed pitcher, 17 years old. Those are very intriguing. But if I had to go one that I think is especially has a chance maybe to be a really good player, Mason Lido out of University of Texas San Antonio had a interesting route in college, went to Oregon, ended up transferring to UTSA. But this year at 24 years old, so a little older for your college senior, but just had a ridiculous year. Hit 366, 24 walks, 23 strikeouts, 10 homers, 17 stolen bases, and made some really huge plays for UTSA in the College World Series, both defensively and center field. He's that spark plug kind of guy who does it all, plays defense, hits. I think the Astros are probably really lucky to get a guy of his caliber. I'm really interested to see how quickly he gets to Fayetteville and what he does once he gets in pro ball. But from Pearland, Texas, local kid, and everything I've heard about him from people that either knew him growing up and knew him in high school and college, just a great kid, great energy, and the kind of guys that you want in the system.
What positions or type of players was the Astros organization weak at coming into this draft? And do you think they addressed those needs?
Yeah, I think position player is where they were struggling a little bit. I think they needed to get some more position players in. This year, they've signed a lot of guys to play like shortstop and outfield that are 26, 27-year-old position players. And I think they did that. I think they went heavy on position players, getting a couple infielders, getting a couple outfitters, and then obviously the high school, getting that high potential. Because that's another area that I think they struggled a little bit, was just down in the lower levels. They had a lot of international talent kind of making its way, but they didn't really have any of the drafted talent down at the lower levels. And now they're there. And I think they addressed it for sure.
Is there particular positions that they were weak at, one or another that you thought, oh, they need some help here?
I mean, they're probably a little bit better in outfield than maybe they were up the middle on the infield, shortstop, second base, at the lower level. So I think, Neyens, and then they drafted another guy, Arroyos, in the 18th round, another high schooler. So in terms of like specific positions, it's hard to say, because I think these guys, as we've seen with a lot of the Astros prospects, they end up playing all over. They play shortstop, second base, third base. If you're in the outfielder, playing all three outfield positions. But I think just getting the position players is what they needed.
How did the national publications rate the Astros draft?
It's hard to say. I read a little bit. I think they missed out on that second round pick, and that's big. That's a good caliber prospect they could have gotten if they didn't lose that pick. But what I read was, people really liked the Neyens pick, and then people liked Frey coming out of LSU, paying him over slot, and then some of the other guys they drafted too. So I think overall, it was a well received draft given what they had to work with in the bonus pool.
Is this similar to the NFL? Are there people out there that are grading certain picks, or is it just kind of they might grade the particular draft, or were there grades? Because everybody is so familiar with what happens with the NFL draft and the NBA draft and stuff like that. I mean, how is it with the baseball draft, I guess?
Yeah, I don't know if I saw any specific grades. I think the hardest thing about baseball, I mean, it's the same way with all the sports. It's really hard to do it right after the draft, but especially in baseball. Like I said, if Neyens is an elite prospect, you're probably still looking at least 3 years before he gets to the bigs, and then you're having to wait a couple of years to see if he's a good big leaguer. So in terms of grades, I think it's hard to say. But like I said, I'm excited about this draft, maybe more so than I have been the past couple, because I think they got some of those high potential guys that they've been missing in the system for quite a while.
When you look at the Astros organization, are the guys that they picked up, is somebody that they might be able to get through the system quickly? A college guy, for example, that they could get through the system quickly and really help the Astros out by, I don't know, next year, like Kim Smith. I mean, we joked about it, but is that possible?
Would never rule it out. I think if it would be, it'd probably end up being a pitcher, maybe a guy like Nick Potter, especially if they wanted to fast track him as a reliever. Ethan Frey, given what he can do in the outfield and what he can do with the bat, those are probably your best chances to get a quick return. Obviously, the Cam Smith was extremely unique. Most guys don't debut after 32 games, but picking number 21 and then using that number 21 pick on a high schooler, it's probably going to be a draft that's going to take a couple of years before you get a debut.
One of the things I think a lot of Astros fans are wondering right now with the trade deadline coming up is, are there guys that the Astros have that other teams you think would be seriously interested in, and the Astros might not need because they've got these guys at the major league levels that are stopping them? Do you see some potential names in the AA and single A level that the Astros can deal at the trade deadline that they're not going to miss?
Yeah, in terms of the low level talent, I think it's kind of hard. I mean, there's not the high rated prospect down there at that single A high level. I think teams seems to gladly ask for Bryce Matthews and Jacob Melton and Walker Yannick, Miguel Ulola, probably the Astros top pitching prospect. And if you had to look at one that you say like, okay, maybe we could potentially lose that guy and be okay, it's probably Ulola, given the amount of starters we have. Now, unfortunately, a bunch of them are injured and hopefully they come back healthy. But I mean, every system has somebody that a team is willing to go after, especially, I mean, like I said, Bryce Matthews, Walker Yannick, they were highly rated and teams would still love to acquire that kind of talent. But unfortunately, the Astros don't have that like depth of talent at the lower level that they can pluck from the low levels and go get a really good talented piece. Now, I think they're going to end up making some kind of move, but it's probably something under the radar. Shea Whitcomb, I don't know if a team is willing to deal for him at this point, just to get him in onto a major league roster to see what he can do, because it kind of feels like he's pretty much blocked and not really getting much time in Houston. But I think they got guys that they can end up trading that do have value, but just not at the level that we've kind of seen in the past.
I'm glad you brought up Ulola, because I want to ask you something about him. One of the things that we know he deals with, and it's his big issue, is walks and wildness. And you look at the Astros right now, and they need starters, obviously, at the major league level. But it seems like if you brought him up, the ideal thing for him might be one of these middle relief guys that if he's throwing strikes, then he stays out there. And if he's just walking everybody, that you could pull him. Do you believe that, that's something that could be in his future as a reliever? Or, is it where the Astros look at him as saying, okay, we're going to leave him down there and keep that value for him, as people might think of him as a starter, and that way we could still deal him at the trade deadline?
Most scouts could look at it, and I think they're going to have the same thought that maybe the Astros, where he's the starter reliever. And if you brought him up and pitched him in relief as a rookie, I think that's understandable too. The Astros have done that with some of the guys, and I just don't think they're at that point where they're ready to pull him up and start using him in a relief role. I think they want him to keep working on whatever he's working on in AAA and try to get that command under control. Because, man, I mean, the guy, he throws like 95, but people just can't hit it. It's kind of Christian Javier like with his fastball. It's kind of an invisible ball that people just cannot touch. I mean, I think at one point on Sunday he was pitching, I think through 2 innings, I think he had 5 or 6 strikeouts. I think he walked like 3 or 4, but he had like 10 swings and misses in like 2 innings, which is just insane. And most of them were on his fastball, and he's throwing at 95. So now he's throwing 102, 104 like Mason Miller. So I think he's a great prospect. And I've been a big proponent of kind of thinking he's going to end up in relief anyways, given some of the command issues. But I think the Astros are going to give him every opportunity to start. And you're right. They maybe wait until after the trade deadline. And then by that point, maybe they pull the plug and pull him up and see what he can do either in a middle relief role, and just get him some professional innings early on in his career.
Does this remind you at all of Christian Javier, in that, that was somebody that they brought up and they were pitching him a little bit in relief early on in his career because they knew he couldn't get the innings because of his wildness, and it just seemed like it always took him 100 pitches to get 3 or 4 innings?
Yeah, I do. I think that's a good comp in terms of how they could use him. Let him get some relief innings, get some major league time, but then get him some starts too. Javier just came up in a different time, when the Astros were a little bit stronger, and I guess maybe they could throw a guy out there and see what he could do. Right now, they're obviously hurt and they need to get some wins as quickly as possible. But I do think he could get an opportunity, especially. I mean, at this point, he just has to, string together maybe a few good outings, and the Astros are going to give him a chance because we got guys getting hurt left and right. Guys getting DFA'd left and right. He's already on the 40-man, I believe. If he's not, he's going to have to be added before this winter anyways. So, yeah, I could see them giving him an opportunity similar to what they gave Javier a few years ago.
One last thing on the trade deadline, and, I don't want you to give me any names, but my thing with the trade deadline is I see Dana Brown mention he wants a hitter. I know the Astros fans want a hitter. It's just been my experience that, pitching, you can never have enough of it. And the Astros are hoping that 3 or 4 guys come back from injury. And we've seen the Astros with pitchers that were supposed to be ready after a year, 2 years, and they're still not ready. And you look at where the Astros are right now, and if they bring back some of these starters, some of these veteran starters that are still trying to ramp up, you're already putting so much workload on the relievers right now. And you're seeing them start to wear down. You're seeing them slipping a little bit because they're having to go 4 innings and 5 innings in a lot of these games. I don't know about you, Jimmy. I'm like, okay, either you get some of these regular guys to come back like Jeremy Pena and Yordan Alvarez, and the lineup gets a hell of a lot better just because of that, or you don't. And you can't win the championship unless Yordan Alvarez and Jeremy Pena come back. I mean, I think Paredes is probably done for the year, but and I'll throw in Jake Myers. If those three guys can come back, then you got a chance to make a run. But you're not going to go get one of those type of guys, all-star level guy with what the Astros have. So I'm just of the opinion you should go after the pitching, because that's where you can really maybe, save a little bit for your bullpen, and you go into the playoffs and, it's Hunter Brown and Fromber and Arrighetti, and maybe one other guy shows up and you're good.
Yeah. And I think maybe part of the problem with that is that, pitching, I feel like, is expensive when it comes to the trade market. I mean, everything is expensive, come the end of July, but like you might be able to get a hitter that is a utility guy or plays a little third base, and, maybe has a 110 OPS plus, little above league average or something like that. But like, I think, you look at some of the trades that have just happened today, and you're giving up a couple prospects for a starting pitcher that has like a 4.3 ERA. I think it just gets really expensive to get pitchers. And then, yeah, I mean, the Astros, like you said, they're going to have to bank on health. At the end of the day, that's what it is. If they don't get Pena and Myers and Jordan back, the offense is probably going to go nowhere. If they don't get Arrighetti and Javier and Garcia, and McCullers doesn't find himself, then it's going to be tough to win anyway. So really, it's like, they could probably use some reinforcements all around. But at this point, if you think Paredes is going to end up being out the season, and just given the lack of depth, I guess, maybe offensively, it feels like that's the route they may end up going. But either way, it's going to balance on. It's going to end up being on health one way or another.
Well, we've been talking mostly Astros future and Astros present, but let's talk a little bit about Astros past, because, man, it was cool this weekend. For the third time in Astros history, a player got their plaque in Cooperstown wearing an Astros cap. Gotta mention Billy Wagner's Hall of Fame speech. And before we discuss it, let's listen back to a clip from my special on Wagner with Astros classic voices Greg Lucas and Bill Brown, who both covered Wagner's career, his entire career in Houston as an Astro.
He was ahead of his time, really, when you stop and think about it, in throwing pitches 100 miles an hour consistently. Nowadays, a lot of people do. But when he was throwing, I know there was one year where he was credited with 159 pitches of 100 or more miles an hour. I may be wrong on the exact figures, but I think the entire league had 56, the rest of the league. And in the American League, it was even worse. There were only 26 pitches thrown of over 100 miles an hour. This was in 2003, I believe. Now, that's not only interesting for Billy, but it's interesting for what's happened in baseball over the last 20 years, because now everybody throws 100 miles an hour, it seems.
He never lost his humility throughout all of his success, never lost it. So as a person, that's what I remember. I remember sitting by him on the airplane and talking, and he didn't want to talk about the game. He didn't want to talk about stats, but he would talk about baseball. He loved baseball. He just had a real passion for talking about anything to do with baseball and his family. And that's what it was all about with Billy. And even when he moved along to the Atlanta Braves, I ran into him one time in a shopping mall in the afternoon. We had a game that night, and we chatted for 15, 20 minutes. He said, I have to go to a meeting. And we would just kind of get lost in basic conversation, nothing special, nothing political, nothing of any great importance to it, but just the kind of guy you wanted to spend time with.
Great stuff from both of those guys, and go check out that entire show. I put it up this weekend. Some of you saw it a few months ago, but in case you missed it, I re-put it up this weekend. And Jimmy, you had to love Billy Wagner's Hall of Fame speech when he started his Astros section, where he's talking about all the Astros and those years, by saying, Lance Berkman, you're a Hall of Famer to me.
Yeah, that's great, because that was Lance Berkman was my favorite player growing up, and definitely felt like he was extremely undervalued, maybe, and he probably didn't have the longevity count stats that maybe some of these other guys have had. But if you look at what he did, OPS wise, OPS plus, and what he did when he played, he was definitely a top hitter. So yeah, great to hear that from Billy.
Yeah, a couple other highlights. I mean, for baseball fans out there, all those speeches are up on YouTube, and Ichiro was hilarious. If you didn't see it, I mean, Ichiro's sense of humor was all the way through a speech. It's really a fun speech. Dick Allen's widow was maybe the speech of all speeches. I just thought she was fantastic. Dave Parker's son had an incredible poem by Parker at the end of his speech that Parker had written before he passed away. And he wanted read at the Hall of Fame. So, that was fantastic. And of course, you got to watch Billy Wagner's speech if you're an Astros fan. I mean, he drops some key Astro names. And Jimmy, for me, a couple of my favorites, he mentions Stretch Suba, who's, forgotten maybe by some younger Astros fans that might not have known much about Stretch Suba, but from 1978 till 2012, he was basically their bullpen catcher. I mean, Stretch Suba, there were generations of people that knew the name Stretch Suba. It's a great name in Astros history. And he mentioned Vern Rule, was one of his pitching coaches. And, Vern died extremely young. Vern was like a year older than I am right now, which is insane that he passed away that young. And Vern was not just an Astros coach. He was an Astros pitcher, 9 years, I think, 9 or 10 years in the Astros organization altogether, 5 playoffs between coaching and playing. So, just a couple of names that he dropped. Of course, he also talked about those guys, Biggio, Bagwell. Maybe you heard of them, Jimmy.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you got to throw those guys out there too. But yeah, man, just a phenomenal career for Wagner. You always felt good with him coming in. I'm glad he finally got the nod. It's hard for closers because they look. Everyone wants to look at counting stats, and they just don't have the counting stats like you normally see from starters. But to me, if you're a top player at your position for 10 or 15 years like Billy Wagner was, then you deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. So really glad to see him get there. And one other nod I will say is it was kind of cool. The Blue Jays put his son Will Wagner on the temporary inactive list for the weekend, so he could go to the Hall of Fame and see his dad get inducted.
He's Astros Future on X. Anything you want to plug, Jimmy, before we take off?
Feel free to check out the site, astrosfuture.com. I just did a piece today about 4 or 5 prospects that have outperformed their preseason rankings. You can check out the draft pick signing tracker. They've all signed, but got information on all the prospects. Got a hot list coming out tomorrow. And then I got a few things in the works for hopefully the next couple of weeks as well.
Sounds good, man. Always fun to catch up with you. Go check out all of his fantastic work. We love him, and he's with us now at Bleav. So really appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks, Robert.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.